Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is the Mastering Package Training for Orbit GCS, the gauge computer software from Solartron Metrology. Please note, for this training session, we will be discussing items for the Mastering Package upgrade. We have already discussed the other versions of Orbit GCS in other training presentations online. Namely, there was an introduction where we discussed the baseline version, which is free, the registered version, which is free, and then upgrade package 1. There is also a training for an SBC upgrade, which is also loaded online. Today we will be discussing the mastering upgrade. Now the mastering package, the purpose of this is to monitor the mastering process for a gauge and see if there are changes over time. So this can better be described as, instead of measuring the quality of a part, you are measuring the quality of a gauge. You can track if there is tool wear or if probes are moving within a fixture. You can also program the software so that a gauge is remastered every hour, every shift, that type of thing. You can also track any mastering trends between operators. Now there is a distinction between zeroing probes and mastering our probes. If you merely zero probes at some point in the measurement range, that's one thing. But when you're mastering the probes, you're basically calibrating or standardizing the sensors in relation to a master part and then saving the settings. So also, when we talk about the absolute reading of a probe, that means that's the absolute reading from any orbit sensor before zeroing or any type of offset. So for example, this probe here, it's 0 to 20 millimeter. If it's moved 2 millimeters, we are talking about the absolute reading being 2 millimeters. So this is an example of what the mastering software pack can do. So let's say you have a gauge with a master part. And then with our software pack, you create a master file and then record the absolute readings of the probes. So what you see there are the absolute readings of the probes that were recorded. So then what happens is over time, as you're placing a master part in the gauge, mastering, the software is tracking to see if the absolute values of those probes have changed. So if you look at this example here, one of the probes, their absolute readings during mastering has gone from 1.4611 to 0.9954. That's a fairly significant change, and it might be because the gauge could be wearing down. Perhaps the probes aren't mounted tight enough in the gauge and they're shifting, or perhaps the sensor is losing calibration. So this is a way to track to see if any of those types of changes have occurred. Another aspect of this software is that you can connect to third-party sensors and force a remaster that way. So for example, you could connect a thermometer via the analog interface module. Then you can trigger a remastering if there is a large change in temperature. There are factories out there where it's very hot during the day, very cold at night, and that might require a remastering. Now, there are two types of mastering in this package. The first is mean mastering, where you standardize probes around a mean master, and that's likely what you use for our digital probes. Then there is max-min mastering, and this is where you calibrate a master file with max and min pieces. So this is better for air gauging. So if you're using our air gauge connection module, this is what you would be using. You can also use an A module to dial in third-party sensors. Okay, so now we are back at our regular gauge screen. And we have the same probes set up that we have before. DP1, DP2, A plus B. And the first thing you want to do before starting the mastering process is set up operators and supervisors. Only a supervisor can create a mastering file. Here you go to Menu, go to Setup Operators, click Add. This is where you can do an operator level or supervisor level set passcode or clear passcode. And then once that's completed, go to Parts, and you go to Mastering. Choose a particular operator, and again, it must be a supervisor. Enter your passcode and click Next. So this is a screen that will list the master data files. Right now, we have not created any. You click New, and then this is the master file main setup screen. Up in the left-hand corner here, you have master file name. So right now, by default, it's just a date code, and you can change this to, let's say, part 1. Then if you see here, there are mastering groups. You can actually create multiple groups if you so choose. So group 1, group 2. This is done with the purpose of, let's say you have like a very large complex gauge with batches of different probes. And you have one doing an A plus B measurement and another one doing a flatness measurement. You can actually set up two different groups for those two different sets of probes. And the first thing you want to do, like say for group 1, we'll click Edit. This is where you want to set up whether it's a mean master, a full master. Right now we'll set it with mean. Click OK. Then the next thing you want to do is assign the inputs or the sensors that you have set up with the software into that group. So right now, if you'll notice, we have DP1 and DP2. Now those are set up in relation to the probes you have set up with the system, not the dimensions that you have set up with the system. So that's why you only see two probes listed and not the A plus B dimension. So here we're just going to assign DP1 to group 1, click DP2 to group 1 as well. You can also click Select All, Select None. You can also click Read, and that will give you the reading here, move up, move down, all of those things. Now, another aspect you have here is, let's say we have highlighted DP1. If you will note, master values and plus minus limits. Now, these are values that you want to set in relation to the mastering. So let's say for DP1, whenever you master, you want the reading to say 2 millimeters. So you would enter that here. Then you have a limit set. Now, this is not the limit for the part. This is the limit that you have set for the mastering. So, for example, while you are mastering, if the absolute value of the probe has moved, like in this example, more than 0.5 millimeters each way, it forces a remaster. In addition, you also have input resolution. Right now we have it set to 4 digits after the decimal. Now, in addition, you also have a dimension value limit. And this is actually where you can force a remastering if one of your dimensional values does change. So for example, if I click here, if you'll see we have DP1 and DP2, but also A plus B. So if there's a value change for A plus B, like say more than 1 millimeter after you've mastered the part, if it goes more than 1 millimeter away from that mastered distance, that will force a remaster. And actually, if you click the question mark, it will discuss that here. Now, for the dimension value limit, this is also where you can set up a third-party sensor. So let's say, for example, if you have a temperature shift of more than 5 degrees, this is where you can set up an analog interface module, set up a thermometer, and then you can have a value change of at least 5 degrees. So an example would be here. Dimensional value limit can be used to monitor other factors such as temperature through the analog interface module. Now, if you'll also notice on the bottom, it says mode, absolute or 0 to stroke. Now, that has to do with the master values here. For the absolute setting, if you click on absolute, and then let's say you have a mean value again, set at 2 millimeter. When you click the absolute reading on your gauging screen, it's going to go to a value of 2 millimeters. So that's again for the absolute mode. However, if you click 0 to stroke, if you have a master value entered, no matter what value, if you click the ABS button, it will always click to 0. So this is handier for min-max mastering because if you click the ABS, it will take you to the minimum reading. So back to the gauging screen. Now again, none of these mastering limits will be enforced unless you turn them on here. Force mastering limits on. Now in the lower left-hand corner, these are basically mastering intervals. This is where if you want an operator to remaster the gauge every hour or every certain number of reading cycles, this is where you go. So the first option is remaster interval. This can be hours, days, minutes. So if you want a gauge remastered, like say every 8 hours or every shift, you want to enter 8 here and turn it on. Now you also have a log start max count and a reading count. Now how this goes is like every time you log in a file, that's one particular time. And then after 250 times, like in this example, that would force the operator to remaster the parts. You can do the same for readings. Now that begs the question, what is the difference between a logging and a reading? Here's an example of logging versus reading here. Basically, one part can have multiple readings, which is filed into one log entry. So take a look at this example here. You have two probes that are checking a shaft at 3 different points. So in this particular case, a log file is started. Then for each diameter, an A plus B reading is taken. So a total of 3 readings are entered into the log file. Now, so if you enter log start max, this will only record every particular log reading, not every particular reading itself. So now, once you have everything set up, you can go to create master. And here, any of the probes that you have set up will be shown here. So right now I have DP1 and DP2. You have them loaded into a gauge. You have your master part placed into the gauge. And right now they're giving absolute readings of 0.4128 and 0.9937. So click Apply Master and go Next. And see here, the actual means are recorded. So you click Apply Master. Then that returns you to the gauging screen. If you'll notice here, it has a remaster button now. Now, one of the things I would like to note is that if you do the min-max mastering, you will just go through the same process, only then you will have a min mastering and then, of course, a max mastering. Now, there's just a few more features we can show you as well. So if you go back to mastering, so right now, the master data file is saved here. But you also have a few other things, like, for example, view log. So this is where a supervisor can view how many times an operator or a supervisor has performed mastering over a period of time. So if you see a mastering was performed on June 10th at 11:47 a.m., then you have the mastering groups shown over here. In addition, you also have this feature, adjust wear offsets. So this is where if your customer is concerned about, wear and tear on the gauge. So if while you're mastering, the absolute values start to drift due to wear, this is where you could perhaps enter a particular wear offset, and then that would force a remaster or force you to, re-examine the gauge. So for example, here we have DP1. The initial value is 0.4128. How much do you want that to change? Let's say we could have it change 0.25 millimeters. So now, if I have this entered, if you are mastering and then the absolute value has shifted more than 0.25 millimeters from that master reading, it will force a remaster. And again, you also have select none, read hardware, view mastering log. Now, another feature you have as well is view current mastering triggers. So for any settings that you have set, this is just a quick review of them. So remaster every 8 hours, last mastered at this particular time, what mastered mode do we have, absolute 0 to stroke, and then of course enforce the last mastering limits. You can turn this to on. So this concludes our training for the mastering section of Orbit GCS. Thank you and have a good day.